times, my son's 6 now, so he understands a little bit better. But when he was younger, he would, cry. He wouldn't understand like why I was leaving to work. And since I work graveyard, especially that, like I'm not able to like sleep with him. So I couldn't imagine how these women must have felt, not being able to be there for their children after being with them for so long. And then now, that drastic change of having to be the providers now of their house or their homes, and being a single mom, like even now, like that's not easy. So I can't even imagine back in the 40s. It really did also, inspire me as well, because you can see that these girls are putting the effort into, their team. There's one scene where they're telling them, that they might be, how to say it? I guess like shut down, like the league might be shut down. And they're like, no, like we've fought hard for this and we don't want to go back to what we were doing before. And, this is what they want to do, their love. And so that's kind of really inspiring. That keeps me like wondering, like back in the days, women fought for their rights and, equality, to be treated, better than just being sexualized, because there's a lot of sexualization in the movie, portrayed. But yeah, like it was a really nice movie, inspiring. You can see, the power between the characters and I mean, even like how it has, Rosie O'Donnell and Madonna and Gina Davis, Lori Petty, like they've actually, with Lori Petty being in like Orange is the New Black, like that's where I had first seen her, and then now seeing her in this movie, I'm like, wow, the connections that they make and how they've also come up to fought for women's stuff, like now in modern day. Those connections.
That's it's pretty interesting, and I'm glad that I was able to bring you on for to discuss a movie like this and kind of pick your brain about it, because CJ was saying when we kind of wrapped the other episode, how it was amazing how like you were saying stuff that he didn't even really realize was happening, or like he was just fascinated by, I guess, your perspective. So that's pretty cool.
CJ, I wish you could have been here. Yeah. You should have just stopped everything on your schedule and be like, nope, this is important. I'm just kidding. So I just kind of wanted to go a little bit back on that quote about the women and their patriotic duty. Yeah. It's Mr. Lowenstein or Lowenstein, maybe? Lowenstein? He's talking to Mr. Harvey, and that's when they're saying, that the men are coming back from the war, we're winning the war, and so they don't have any use for the women's baseball league anymore. And so he says, like, this is what's going to happen in the factories too, right? Like, the men are back, so, Rosie, turn in your rivets, and, it's their patriotic duty to get out of the kitchen and go to work. And then now, since the men are coming back, then we're just going to send them back into the kitchen. And that really, like, stuck out to me, because it's like, okay, only when you need the women is when you appreciate them. And then later on, they're just like objects, like, okay, back, we don't need you anymore, just go back. And it portrays how women, were before the women's rights and being out trying to get that equality. Like, that's how we were treated. And, I say we, because as a woman, like, you hear about these stories about how, it was always like the man was right, or you had to kind of cater to your husband, and obviously we've come a long way from that, but even now, like, it still feels at times that you're like, oh, the correct thing, or the correct way that things should happen is you find a man, you get married, you have children, and then you live the rest of your life happy. And I mean, especially in my case, like, I'm not married. I don't even have a partner right now, and I already have a 6-year-old. You know what I mean? So some people may frown upon that, but being more the modern time, like, some people are like, oh, it's okay. There's a lot of single mothers out there, and it's, I don't want to say a norm, but it is pretty normal now, and back in the day, I'm pretty sure that would have been very, like, frowned upon. And so that's one of the realizations when I was like, wow, like, they really can just kind of, or that's how they felt, like, just send them back to the kitchen. Like, we don't need them anymore. And I mean, obviously, that's not the case now. Like, we fight for our rights, and we're like, no, we are going to be heard. You know, like, this is what we want to fight for ourselves.
Definitely destroy the patriarchy, right?
Oh yes. I have a fanny pack that says "ducking patriarchy." Another thing that I did want to touch on was kind of like the sexualization of the women, you know, starting with like the uniforms, how they weren't really given an option. It was like, you play in this dress, basically, you know, it was like over the knee, or you don't play baseball at all. And they were kind of like, what is going on here? You know, like, we can't even squat in that. How are we supposed to like run or dive or slide or anything? And they're like, oh, well, this is what it is. And obviously it was to, you know, appeal to the men. I mean, what else, right? Yeah,
to get people in the seats, and that's it's a pretty sad thing to see how they're, even though they fight back on various things throughout the film, that's one thing that they just can't really, they have to lean into it, because they're like, well, we really want to play, so let's just kind of deal with this, you know what I mean? But it's sad that they wouldn't give them, you know, some kind of guards so they could at least slide, or, you know, some long shorts or something that's more practical. It was just so silly that that was something. And I mean, go ahead.
Sorry. I remember that you mentioned how they got hurt, you know, even during the actual scenes. And there's a scene where there's like a giant bruise and it's all cut up and bad, and they're taking a picture of it, and you mentioned like that was real. And so I mean, baseball players nowadays, I mean, they have, you know, those long, you know, or like those pants up to, you know, and there's long socks, and like they slide, and they obviously might get hurt, but I can not imagine sliding in a skirt, in a dress, and having that giant bruise on my thigh like that. Like, I'm like, poor of them, you know, what they had to do, what they had to go through.
Yeah, like think about how many games that these ladies are playing, all of these ladies in the major league, and that they were able to put up with it, and then on top of that, being objectified like every game by men who are just like, oh yeah, they're playing baseball, but they're not baseball players. I mean, even Dugan, Tom Hanks's character, for a long, you know, he does make some great character development throughout the film, and he warms up to them by the end. But when he first starts, you know, he's this kind of reject player who's forced to kind of coach them, and he doesn't take them seriously. He doesn't, you know what I mean? He's very much like that typical male who just doesn't respect women in general, you know? And that's kind of, I feel like, how do you say, like, that's just how men were, all men were back then. You know, it was a normal thing. It was like, you know, women are supposed to be in the kitchen. Why do they think that they're, you know, they can come out here and play, not even, you know, like a pro, in a pro league? Because I think it started out, I don't know if you know this, but it started out as like a softball. A lot of those women came from playing softball, their love of softball, and it kind of transformed into baseball over time.
Yeah, no, and even touching on what you're saying about how men not taking, you know, the women seriously, like, there's a couple of times in the movie where they're like making fun of them, and they're like, oh, you know, don't break a nail, or like, you know, this and that, and so in one case, you know, they I think, I don't remember who it was, but I think they like throw the ball at him and, you know, hit him, and it kind of gets like a laughing or like a humor, you know, part of it. But at the same time, it's like there's a lot of times where the men just didn't believe. They're like, oh yeah, you know, what are they going to do? How are they going to play? And how you mentioned, you know, Tom Hanks' character also is like never really referred to them as baseball players, you know, until almost the very end. then he truly like saw them or as their true potential as he kept working with them. And I feel like even when Dottie was taking charge, basically, he was kind of like managing in the beginning, and he was just like drunk on the side, and that even got him to like start, you know, being the actual manager, or like being, you know, telling them what to do in the plays. And I feel like it was just because Dottie was taking charge. Like, he didn't want a woman to take charge, you know? Maybe that could have been one of the cases that he actually started doing his job. But then he realized, you know, okay, these women are out here playing their best and doing their best. Another thing I had... Oh, okay. So we did talk about this when Doris is expressing on the bus how she was treated because of, you know, playing, and how they were like, she was wrong or weird. And I think it was like the picture of that boyfriend, and she was like, oh, he's the only one that didn't make me feel like that. But at the same time, like, she still wasn't happy, and she still felt, you know, rejected because of, I mean, it just brought back to me of how women were just rejected for not either being pretty or for being too masculine, or, you know, too sporty or something like that. And it happens, you know, even nowadays. Like, I talked about how in high school sometimes it felt like that. Like, you know, you're in PE and they're picking teams, and they're not really looking at your skill. They're more looking at, you know, your body or your face. That's what it feels like. Like, it's still, in, you know, as a society, we try to make those rules of, like, you know, love your body and be okay in your body and who you are. But then at the same time, like, there's those portrayal of, like, those, you know, models or those skinny models, and or like what an average woman should look like. And so it just kind of all connects to, like, how some men treat other women differently because of likes or, you know, looks, instead of what, you know, skill or personality or who they really are.
Yeah. It's like we've said, it's just sad, and men, even still now today, of course, we need to do better, just all around, you know. Do better, guys.
Yeah, no. Do better, society as well. No, but yeah, like, there's just so much in this movie that, you know, does, as a woman, like I mentioned, that it really just hits you differently. Maybe also that, you know, that's how CJ mentioned about, you know, having my perspective, like things that he didn't even think about, because at the same time, you know, like, you don't think as a girl. And a lot of those things, like, for us, is our appearance and how we look, and what society, you know, what the standards are in society. And so that's why I'm like, that really got to me. I remembered, you know, from high school that. And well, I mean, touching base on Dottie and Lori, you know, as sisters, they're kind of, you know, the first characters that they presented, and it's Kit. Sorry, it's actually Kit, not Lori. I'm so sorry. Kit and Dottie. How Kit is being compared a lot to Dottie, and, you know, how if it wasn't for Dottie, Kit wouldn't be in the league, you know, because of how they wanted Dottie because she was beautiful and she was a good player, and Kit was like, I'm a good pitcher, and everybody's like, yeah, like, we want your sister, not you. And it's, you know, it had that big impact on their, you know, sister rivalry that they had during the movie. And I feel like that was another thing too, like, how being, you know, because of how pretty, I guess, Dottie could be, and how Kit, you know, wasn't pretty, or was just like the kid sister of the star of the league.
Yeah, she's very much stuck kind of in the shadow of Dottie, or Gina Davis's character, for most of the time, and I feel like that sister rivalry is very much like the heart of this film. One of the main focuses is their kind of journey, and how they kind of adapt to trying to navigate through baseball, and then keep their their relationship okay. And then, you know, as we get to the end of the film, they kind of close that out with Dottie Kit gets drafted to another team. So
yeah, she gets